So the Hebrew language is tight, deep, sacred, 3D, hot.
Hello, you're live on the air. Please tell us your name and where you're calling from.
Hello, my name's Justin from Iowa, and my question has to do with, in the Gospels, Jesus mentions the sin that cannot be forgiven, the blasphemy against the Holy Spirit. And so my question is there an equivalent sin in Judaism where there's a sin that can't be forgiven? And kind of a second part to the question, is it possible that there might be these verses in, I believe it's Mark 3:22, Matthew 12:22, where this is mentioned. If it's a later insertion after the doctrine of the Trinity was developed, in order to support it and to quell any resistance. I know that's kind of conjecture, but I've always wondered that, and that's just my question. So thank you.
Yeah, it's a very interesting question. So in the synoptic, I'm going to rephrase it a little bit, but in the synoptic Gospels, in Mark 3 and Luke 11 and Matthew 12, it's Matthew chapter 12, verse 32 you're referring to. Jesus says that if you commit blasphemy against the Holy Spirit, so then your sin is not forgiven. And his two-part question is, number one, that sounds Trinitarian, is the question. And the second part of the question was, is there any corresponding sin that one could possibly commit in the Jewish faith that is essentially an unpardonable sin? Those are good questions. I want to turn your attention to Matthew chapter 12, verse 32. And there it illustrates that the writers of the Christian Bible, whoever they were, did not think that Jesus was God. Because in verse 32, it says explicitly that whoever will speak against the Son of Man, meaning whoever commits the act of blasphemy against Jesus, so that sin can be forgiven. Only the person who commits blasphemy against the Holy Spirit, only that act cannot be forgiven. Now, if Jesus was fully God and equal to the Holy Spirit and was begotten but not created, and he's co-eternal, very light of very light, you hear me borrowing the language of the Nicene Creed. He is eternal God, equal to the Father and the Son. They have unique hypostatic entities, but they are in union of just separate persons, using like the language of the church. I'm deliberately using that language because I want to show you how odd that language is, how unconventional that language is. No one uses it, and the church is able to hide behind it because it doesn't really make any sense. But the point is, if Jesus is equal to God and equal to the Holy Spirit, then why would blasphemy against the Son of God, meaning against Jesus, why would that not qualify as an unpardonable sin, but only against the Holy Spirit? The view of the synoptics was that Jesus was not equal to the Father and not equal to the Holy Spirit. And the Holy Spirit in classical Judaism is the dynamic movement and presence of God, whatever that means. But the way we're able to encounter God is that we are creating the image of God, and that enables us to be aware of God. No animal, no creature, no living creature on earth believes in God but mankind. And the way we're able to perceive the presence of God is through the Ruach HaKodesh, right? So that's God. It's his presence. And the word Ruach HaKodesh is really interesting because the word Ruach means spirit, and it also means wind, same word. Incidentally, in Greek, it's the same word as well. Why is that? Because you can't actually see the wind, right? You can't see the wind. It's air just moving around. It's not visible, but you could see the effect of the wind. You could see leaves blowing, so you know it's windy. When you look out the window and you want to know if it's a windy day, you see the trees moving. But the tree moving is not the wind itself. You are able to perceive the presence of the wind, the air moving, by its effect on the tree, see? So the Spirit of Hashem is that effect of the presence of God that we're able to perceive. It's not a separate person, as in the doctrine of the Trinity, a distinct hypostatic entity. That's all later Christian invention. And that's important because whoever wrote the book of Matthew was operating under that understanding, that the Holy Spirit is God. It's God's presence. And therefore it is distinct from Jesus, who in Matthew's view was not God, was not equal to the Father. And by the way, if Jesus is equal to the Father in the most modern, embellished iteration of Christianity, the doctrine of the Trinity, then why is Jesus the Son? Like, why isn't the Father the Son and the Son the Father? I mean, when words mean everything, they mean nothing. Very important saying in the Jewish faith. If the word means everything, then it just means nothing. Right? So why is Jesus the Son? Why isn't he the Father if they're co-eternal? Okay? So what's vital to understand is that what we encounter in the synoptic Gospels demonstrates that the authors did not believe in the Trinity. And that's why there is a different punishment for someone who commits an act of blasphemy against the Holy Spirit than against the Son. The Son, you will be forgiven. I'm making this up. Look at Matthew chapter 12, verse 32. It's not 22, it's 32. For the Son you're forgiven, for the Holy Spirit you're not forgiven. That's the unpardonable sin, okay? So you got that locked up. So that demonstrates they're not equal. And in fact, the doctrine of the Trinity is nowhere to be found in the Christian Bible, with the exception of one passage, and that's in 1 John chapter 5, verse 7 and 8. And you'll only find that in translations like the King James Version, and you certainly will find it in Latin and Coptic translations. But that's a later interpolation, a later invention. On the contrary, the idea that the Father, the Word, and the Spirit, they're all one, that was added in precisely because there was an absence of any mention of the doctrine of the Trinity. And without that passage, the doctrine of Trinity can only be inferred. I discuss this extensively in Volume 1 of Let's Get Biblical. And now to your other question, is there an unpardonable sin in God's view, meaning in Judaism, because that's the faith that God has established for mankind and how to worship God. There is one sin that comes close to unpardonable. Now, there's a principle that a person can atone for any sin until a person dies. However, if someone commits an act of blasphemy against the name of Hashem, if someone utters the name of God, is an act of blasphemy. That means not any name of God, a specific name of God which religious Jews will not pronounce. And when you encounter people who encourage you to pronounce it, don't listen to them. The Torah says in the Ten Commandments, I will not forgive you for that. If you utter the name of God in vain, that is unforgivable. I explain in another video, and maybe I'll just do it here. It's because it's like saying your parents' name. When you say the actual name of God, what you're doing is you're saying you're not my God. If a person's angry at God, and people are, it's like your parents. You can, my sisters are all great, so it doesn't work for me. Like, my sisters are like the greatest women that I know, like, really are. So it doesn't apply to me, but let's say you have a sister that screamed out, "Mommy, I hate you. You're the worst mommy in the world," right? So that would be pretty bad, right? And maybe you heard your brother say something like that, "Dad, I hate you," right? And slamming the door. You might have heard that, right? But eventually you can make up. And you might not get involved in that thing. You might go, "Oh, boy, I hope they work that out," right? But if you heard your brother call your father David, you'd probably be shocked by that, right? You're the worst daddy in the world, whatever. But if your brother said David, and your father's name is David, so that would shock you. That would shock you. Why? If your sister called your mother Sarah, you probably would be shocked. And you probably would say, "You can't call mommy by her name." Why? You're the worst mommy in the world, maybe. But by her name, that's too far. Why? Why don't kids typically cross that line? Because if you say you're the worst, so whatever, things are not working out right now. But the moment your sister calls your mother by her first name, what she is actually doing is she's saying, "You're not my mother anymore," right? So no matter how angry you have been at your parents, presumably you never called your parents by their first name. You've never addressed them by their first name, right? So, and you're probably wondering why. I've been angry at my parents, right? Well, the reason is because what you're then saying is that "You're not my mother anymore." And that's what you're doing by uttering the name of God in vain, not other names. There are many names of God that we say in prayer, that we say when we're reading from the scripture itself, but otherwise we would be reluctant to say that, certainly not in ordinary conversation. We don't do that. But in prayer, we would. But there's one name of God, the Tetragrammaton, never say it. If people try to convince you to say it, don't listen to them. But in the Bible, it seems like people are saying it, but they're not. I'll just do this one thing, or else I only have 5,000 questions on this. If you go to Exodus chapter 6, verse 3, God is speaking to Moses, and he says, "Your forefathers, they knew El Shaddai, but they didn't know this name." And you might go, "What do you mean they didn't know it? It's all over the place," like Genesis 15, verse 8. So it's very important to understand what that means, but it does not mean they were walking around using that name. You have to understand, what do you mean they didn't know it? What does that mean to know, right? And I'm using Genesis 15 very deliberately. Abraham asks what seems to be an impossible question of, "How can I know?" B'ma'eda. What do you mean, how can I know? You're Abraham. You don't believe? What is he asking for? So knowing is the experience. But this is the problem of not speaking Hebrew. And that's why, incidentally, intimacy between a man and a woman is to know. He knew her. People think that's just a euphemism. It isn't. It means to experience. So the Hebrew language is tight, deep, sacred, 3D, hot. When I say to you, if you don't know the original Hebrew and you're not using the original Hebrew when studying the Bible, and I say things like, "You're kissing God through a towel," and you go, "Oh, that sounds terrible," I'm not overstating it because I'm really hyped up on getting you to study it. It's not hyperbole. You really are. It's all been just smoothed out. Moreover, translations understandably want their renditions, they want their translations to be very readable, right? But then you have to put it in a very readable style. Like, like the NIV. It's very readable, or the Jewish publication, JPS. They want to make it very readable, but in order to make it readable, they have to really sacrifice. Not only now are you translating from Hebrew to English, which you can't translate. It's a commentary, so not only are you doing that, but now you're changing the idioms completely so that it's pleasant to read, because Hebrew just reads very different. So it's all smoothed out. So to answer your question, going back to it, the unpardonable sin mentioned in the Synoptic Gospels illustrates that the evangelists who wrote those books, we don't know who wrote the Synoptic Gospels. No matter what people tell you, we don't know who wrote them. Okay? But whoever wrote them did not think Jesus was equal to God or the Holy Spirit, or what would be the difference. So it's very clear, Matthew 12:32, they're not the same. Okay? And the worst thing you can do is commit an act of blasphemy against the name of God, as we see in Exodus chapter 20, the Ten Commandments, for example. Thank you for your question.
אדון עולם אשר מלך בטרם כל יציר נברא לעת נעשה בחפצו כל אזי מלך שמו נקרא ואחרי ככלות הכל לבדו ימלוך נורא והוא היה